Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Coding Kaiju. My name is Diego. Once again, we are picking up right where we left off. So, we've been building our game, fleshing out all the details, adding juice, but we have yet to implement the ending to our game. You've probably noticed in our player script, when the player gets hit by an asteroid, we simply queue free it. Today, we're going to flesh that out. So go ahead and open up the player scene. And then its script as well. We have it already open here. And we're going to add a particle effect for when the player explodes. This process is going to be almost identical to the asteroid explosion, but I'm going to teach you a few new things. So make sure you have the player node selected. And let's add a new node of type particles 2D. Go ahead and create that. And let's rename it to particles player explosion. And let's go ahead and save that as its own scene right here in the objects folder. And let's go ahead and save it. Control S to save. And then here in the player scene, make sure to delete it, this node from here. Go back down here and open it up, that scene again. Particles player explosion. And now let's define its properties. So just like last time, we have to implement a process material first. And the process material, go down, new particles material. And there we go, we get the default effect there. Once again, I'm going to zoom in a little so we can see what's going on. And let's set its properties. So for this one, we're going to make the amount 200. We want a lot of particles for this one. Open up the time. And explosiveness is going to be 0.5. And since this effect is going to be an explosion, we are going to enable the one-shot property, but not till the end. So we can see what's going on while we're working with it. So let's go ahead and expand the particles material. And let's go down to emission shape. We're going to make it a sphere. I'm going to make the sphere radius of size 2. Get some really large particles there. Let's see, flags are all default. Direction. We don't want any direction, and we want the spread to be 180 degrees. And we don't want it to have any gravity. And give it an initial velocity of 100. Boom, there we got the beginnings of our explosion effect. Let's give a randomness value of 0.5. Next, we'll change the linear acceleration. We want an acceleration of 100. With a randomness value of 0.2. And this is the new thing. We're going to add an acceleration curve. So curves are a really good way to give your particle effects a more natural feel. See, hardly anything in nature is linear. And all these properties by default are mostly linear. So let me show you what I mean by curve. Go ahead and click this drop-down arrow. Let's add a new curve texture. Open it up. Open up the curve. And then we have a graph which we can manipulate. So let's change these min and max values to negative 400 and positive 400. Let's expand this a little. All right, so I'm going to set this first point to the max, 400 right here. And then let's add a point about right here. Put it on 0. And you can use these to turn the angle of this point, which affects the graph. I'm going to turn this graph and aim it down a little. And same with this top one. We're going to raise it up a little so it goes above the 400 initially. And you can see how it changes the particle effect here. So we didn't have to type in any equations. We could just visually change this graph. And so initially, the particles will accelerate very quickly, 400, and their acceleration will slow down, and it'll eventually even out to 0 at the end of their life cycles. You can see that here. They're moving very fast, and they're slowing down by the end of their life cycle. And a ton of these properties here allow us to implement a curve. So let's go down to the scale section right here. I'm going to change scale to 2, double the size of these particles. And then let's set a curve here as well. New curve texture, expand that, expand the curve. And this one's going to be a lot more simple. Let's set the max value to 2.5. And then we're just going to raise the initial value to that 2.5. And now at the beginning of their lifetime, the particles are big. And you know, while we're at it, let's open up the color property. And we're going to use a color ramp. And we're going to use a gradient texture. So a gradient is sort of the curve equivalent in colors. So by default, it's all black. So let's add a new gradient and go ahead and expand that. And now you can see the beginning colors are different from the ending colors. So you can use these sliders here, but sometimes I find it easier to just set the values directly in these arrays. So let's set this one, the offsets to 5 values. The first offset is going to be 0. Next one is going to be 0.15, 0.4, and 0.8. So that change, it doesn't update here for some reason until we open it and close it again, but it adds multiple breaks. So now let's open the colors array and set these colors. Go ahead and open 0. So for this one, I want to choose a yellow, kind of a pale yellow, not too vivid and saturated. It's good. Click out of it. And then for 1, I'm going to choose a darker, maybe a darker goldish color. Looks good. For the 2 index, go up and start getting into the orange. We're going to choose a sort of a little more red. A reddish, orangish brown. Fine, and you can see, you know, your effects here. Going to open up this third color. We're going to get even more red. This is really starting to look like a fiery explosion. Okay, and then that last one, we want it to be a vivid red-orange. And now this is what our explosion looks like. You know, I don't like that initial color. Go back. And maybe make it a little more white. There we go. Again, you can choose whichever colors you want to get the effect you want here. And you can use as many offsets as you need. So if we close and open the gradient, so this is the final result here visually. So these are the offsets. And then we're choosing the colors at the beginning and end of the offsets. Okay, once you're satisfied with your explosion color, let's go ahead and add a new node to this. Type audio stream player 2D. And this is where we're going to play the explosion sound. Let's go ahead and load in audio, sound effects, shape explosion.wave. Go ahead and save that and make sure you enable autoplay so that it plays as soon as this scene is added to the game. All right, so now let's spawn this explosion when the player dies or loses. Let's go ahead and open up the player scene and its script. And here, this bottom function on hitbox body entered, we have if the player is hit by an asteroid, we queue free it. So we're going to edit that. We're actually going to call a function explode. And then let's define that now. Func explode. Of course, we got to, as usual, import our scene. So let's go over here to the top and import our scene. Call it player explosion scene equals load. Then remember, you can always click and drag this one, player explosion scene. Okay. And then we'll instance that here. Explosion equals player explosion scene, tab to autocomplete. I'm going to instance that. We want the explosion to appear where the player was. And then we want to add it to the scene. But we want to get the parent because we're about to free the player scene itself. And now that it's added to the tree, let's make sure you turn on the emitting property of the particle. And then remember we had the queue free up here, so go down another line and queue free. So let's go ahead and run the project. And our player explodes, but the explosion effect happens repeatedly because we never turned on one shot. Go ahead and close that out. Let's go back to our player explosion scene and make sure you have the particle selected. Scroll all the way to the top and enable one shot. Okay, now when we run the project, there we go. The player explodes and the particle effect only happens once. Okay, let's add music to our game. So let's go ahead and open up the game scene and select the game node. We're going to add a new node of type audio stream player, not audio stream player 2D, because we want the music to play naturally, to fill the player's ears. We don't want it to be played positionally in the game's world. So audio stream player, we're going to rename that to music player. Because this player will be in charge of playing the game's music. Go here to the stream and let's load in assets, audio, music. And we're going to do this first one with the 3 in the title. Saw square noise, 3, towel defense and game. I did not name these files. This was just the default name from the website I got it on. You can read the README in that asset folder if you want to learn about that. So then let's expand this stream property and make sure loop is enabled because we want the main music to be looping as we play the game. All right, that's good. And again, you'll have to set your soundscape to the way you want it. I set my volume for this music to -10. And then make sure to enable autoplay so that the music starts playing as soon as the game loads. Okay, now let's add a game over screen. So our game over screen isn't going to be anything fancy. Select this game node. It's just going to be a simple label. And let's rename that to game over label. And in the text field, you're just simply going to say game over. Set the align and v-align properties to center. And then go down here to the custom fonts. We're going to enable load in a custom font, new dynamic font, open that. Load in that same font we've been using, Ubuntu Mono Bold. And I'm actually going to set the font size to 200. And then we're going to actually enable the font shadow. And then we're just going to move this label to, you know, the center of the screen here. This is a pretty basic game over screen. I actually challenge you to make it better. You know, maybe track some stats, you know, for such as how many shots the player has fired, and display them on this game over screen. So by default, we want this label to not be visible. So we're actually going to make this node here invisible by selecting this eye icon here. And we're going to make it visible when the game is over through code. So to do this, we actually want to have this game scene open, and we're going to open the player script from here. The reason I'm telling you to do it this way is so we can easily connect the signals here. So let's actually go up here and define a new signal. I'm just going to simply call it player died. And then we're going to emit the signal in the explode function. Now, make sure you have the player node selected. Go to the node, just make sure you have the signals tab open, and double click on the player died signal and connect it to that root game node. And it's going to generate a function for us. And I'm actually going to write a comment here so that we know what this function is. I haven't been doing it as much as I should have been, but it's really good practice to comment your code. You know, write a comment over functions that, you know, help you describe what the function is or what it does, or anything that helps explain what the code is doing, because it's not super obvious. If I or you were to come back to this project, you know, a few weeks, a few months down the line, and you wanted to edit what happens when it's game over, it wouldn't be really intuitive to have this onPlayerDied function and to know that, oh, that's the function where the game over stuff happens. Especially if you can imagine, you know, some of our scripts here are tons of lines long, and so you're scrolling through it, trying to find which function is the one you need to edit. So it's really helpful to have these comments here to explain what's going on. So I've already messed around with the game over function a little bit, so I'm going to show you what I did to make it a little nicer. So let's add a new node of type timer and rename that to game over timer. Go back to the inspector, and we want it to run once. And you'll see why we have this timer in just a second. Go back to the node here, connect the timeout signal to the game node, and we left it at the default 1 second. So this function is going to be what happens immediately after the player dies. And then we'll run our timer, and 1 second later, this function will run. And you'll see why we're doing it this way in just a second. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to write a comment. We're going to stop the gameplay music, and we're going to load the game over music. So we can access our music player and call the stop function. And then we're going to change what audio file that music player is playing after it's already stopped. You can go up here, go into the file system, audio, music, and we're going to do this number 6. This is our game over music. So by default, it's looping. So let's actually disable that loop. .music player .stream.loop equals false. And then how did I know that this was the property you needed? You can always go back over here to the music player. So there's the stream property. If you expand the stream, and there's that loop property within the stream. In case you don't know how I know these things exist. And then finally, we're gonna actually lower the volume a little. So I made it -10 over here is the regular gameplay music. So for the game over music, I'm gonna set it to -5, which is a little louder, closer to 0. So then, after that, we want the asteroids to stop spawning. Space there. We want the asteroids to stop spawning. And so if you open up the asteroid spawner and read this code, you'll remember that we have a timer here. And every time this timer runs out, it's on repeat, it spawns a new asteroid. So in order to stop the asteroids from spawning, we're going to stop this timer. So let's open up that game script again. I'm going to ask the asteroid spawner and the spawn timer, and we're going to stop the timer. So no more new asteroids will spawn when the player dies. And then just for a little quality detail, we're actually going to turn off the asteroid sound, that roaring sound, for any asteroids that are already in the game. I'm going to turn them off immediately. And so to do that, we're going to use a for loop. So for every asteroid in, so let's get the scene tree. And then we want to get all the nodes in the group asteroids. Remember, we add every asteroid to a group called asteroids. And now each individual asteroid will get its audio stream player. We'll get its child called audio stream player 2D, and we'll tell it to stop playing. Oh, don't forget the colon there at the end of the for loop. And so you can even check, open up the asteroid scene. And so for every asteroid, we're accessing this one, the audio stream player 2D, because that's what it's called here. All right, back to the game script. And then don't forget, we want to start that game over timer. So timer starts, and after 1 second, we're going to play the game over music. And then we're going to show that game over label we made. So the correct file is already loaded up, so we just need to call the play function, and we want it to start from the beginning. So play, starting at 0. And then we're going to access that game over label. And I'm going to set its visible property to true. And so why do we have the second delay between all this code and then this code? Basically, in this second gap between these two functions, the player is going to explode, and we're going to see that, hear the explosion sound and see the visual explosion particles. And by waiting, it just makes our game feel a little bit better. I'll show you right now. And there we have it, our game over screen. All right, guys, I think we're gonna stop there. Thank you so much for watching the video. Please like if you liked the video, subscribe if you want to be notified when the next video comes out. And as always, thanks for watching.